I guess, Burt, you haven't been nominated this year.
No, you haven't been either, Kirk. Congratulations.
Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster were two titans of Hollywood's golden age, towering icons of masculinity and cinematic charisma whose names became synonymous with bold performances and classic American cinema. Their collaborations spanned decades, from the gritty showdown of Gunfight at the OK Corral to the caper comedy Tough Guys, leaving behind a legacy of screen chemistry that fans still revere. But behind the smiles and camaraderie lived a rivalry more complicated than fans knew, marked by egos, insecurity, and the kind of brotherly tension that could turn laughter to tears. Now, Kirk's son, Michael Douglas, is lifting the veil on his father's true feelings, revealing a grudge that lingered beneath the surface for years. Clashing titans.
Well, we had sometimes conflicting views, shall we say, on things, which I think is good and healthy in any relationship.
When Kirk Douglas and Burt Lancaster first shared the screen in 1947's I Walk Alone, both were relatively new to Hollywood, but already determined to dominate it. Lancaster, with his imposing 6'2" frame and athletic background, carried the aura of a natural-born star. Douglas, shorter in stature but no less driven, had a chip on his shoulder and a fierce determination to be recognized as a serious actor. The tension between them, though masked by smiles and publicity photos, was rooted in their shared ambition and radically different personalities. Lancaster was known for his confidence and control. He often took charge of productions, co-owned a production company, and was vocal in his political beliefs. Douglas, by contrast, was intensely focused, emotionally volatile, and deeply insecure about how he was perceived, especially next to men like Lancaster. The visual contrast didn't help either. Lancaster's height towered over Douglas, and the latter's sensitivity about his stature was a long-standing issue. According to biographers and friends, Douglas loathed being reminded of his physical limitations, and Lancaster, whether jokingly or not, often hit that nerve. One of the most telling moments came during a fan event years after their prime. Lancaster took to the stage to introduce Douglas, and in classic fashion made a crack about Douglas's use of shoe lifts to appear taller. It was meant as a joke, but it drew blood. In full view of the audience, Kirk Douglas burst into tears. The moment, captured in anecdotes but never shown publicly, has become a symbol of the love-hate dynamic that defined their friendship. What was meant as banter exposed the insecurity Douglas carried throughout his career, especially when standing next to Lancaster. Michael Douglas later reflected on his father's guarded nature and emotional walls, many of which were built during these years of perceived rivalry. The younger Douglas, in interviews, has suggested that Kirk's relentless work ethic, emotional distance, and occasional coldness stemmed from the need to prove himself, always feeling like he was being compared, whether to fellow actors like Lancaster or later to his own son. The quote-unquote difficult man label stuck with Kirk Douglas for decades, but it didn't come from nowhere. It came from a place of deep personal frustration, some of which Lancaster, intentionally or not, exploited. Even in their most successful collaborations, like Gunfight at the OK Corral, their dynamic reflected this tension. Douglas played the emotionally tormented Doc Holliday, Lancaster the resolute and upright Wyatt Earp. On screen, their personas clashed just as they did off camera. The pairing worked because the conflict was real, and while the audience saw perfect harmony, what they didn't see was a partnership built on mutual irritation and a long-standing power struggle. When camaraderie turned to contempt.
You're one of the most perfectly mysterious people he's ever met. What does he mean by that?
I have no idea what he means by.
Despite their underlying rivalry, Douglas and Lancaster were frequent collaborators. They starred in multiple films together and at times appeared to be inseparable as both friends and colleagues. But their friendship was anything but simple. It was, in many ways, an ongoing competition of style, popularity, and masculinity. Lancaster, with his commanding presence and spontaneous wit, often played the alpha. Douglas, despite his fame, never seemed entirely comfortable playing second fiddle. The discomfort came to a head during various public appearances. One infamous moment unfolded when Lancaster introduced Douglas at an American Academy of Dramatic Arts tribute. Quote, "Kirk would be the first to admit he's a very difficult man," Lancaster began, pausing for effect before adding, "and I would be the second." The crowd laughed, but Douglas was reportedly stung. Even in tribute, Lancaster's remarks carried a teasing edge that left Kirk feeling undermined. To the audience, it was good fun. To Kirk, it was another reminder of the imbalance in their dynamic. Even in private, Lancaster's teasing could push Douglas to the brink. One evening after a screening, as recounted in Kate Buford's biography, An American Life, Lancaster reportedly needled Douglas about his acting style and penchant for intensity. Douglas, sensitive and deeply proud of his craft, snapped. The encounter ended in a heated argument, with Douglas storming off. These outbursts weren't isolated. Over the years, their friendship weathered countless similar flare-ups, always cycling between warmth and friction. The laughter they shared on set, while genuine, often masked deeper frustration. During the filming of Gunfight at the OK Corral, production was halted for an entire day because the two stars couldn't stop giggling during a dramatic scene. Douglas later admitted their macho performances in the saloon shootout felt absurd in the moment, leading to uncontrollable laughter. But beneath the humor was a growing awareness that their partnership had become something of a circus act, two men constantly trying to outdo one another, both on screen and off. Michael Douglas has since suggested that this pattern of ego clashes and emotional volatility influenced how his father treated others, including his own children. Kirk's early prioritization of career over family, Michael said, created a distant and sometimes difficult relationship. It wasn't until later in life that Kirk softened, recognizing the ways his insecurities had shaped his life. But by then, his feelings about Lancaster had calcified into something more complex, a mixture of affection, admiration, and unspoken resentment. Rivalry on set.
You're a nightcrawler, Colonel. A peddler. You sell information. Are you sufficiently up on your Bible to know who Judas was?
Yes, I know who Judas was.
Perhaps nowhere was the Douglas-Lancaster rivalry more evident than during their shared film projects. As co-stars, they brought undeniable chemistry to the screen, but behind the scenes, they often butted heads over creative decisions, billing order, and even lines of dialogue. Both men were control-oriented, fiercely protective of their image, and intolerant of being overshadowed. Their shared projects became battlegrounds, not just for their characters, but for their egos. Take 7 Days in May, for instance. In the political thriller directed by John Frankenheimer, Lancaster played a hawkish general attempting a military coup, while Douglas portrayed the principled colonel trying to stop him. Though they were cast in complementary roles, both actors reportedly lobbied for more screen time and influence over the film's direction. According to crew accounts, Lancaster tried to rewrite certain scenes to highlight his character's arc, only to be met with stiff resistance from Douglas, who demanded that the original structure be honored. Their on-set arguments sometimes spilled into the press. Interviews from the time hint at their icy professionalism, with both men refusing to praise the other too generously. While they never openly attacked one another in interviews, the omission of compliments was telling. They knew how to walk the line, enough warmth to sell the film, but never enough to relinquish personal dominance. A son's perspective.
Oh, I didn't do anything. Let's have a drink and talk it over.
You're afraid, you cobarde.
Never call a man that, no matter what, never do it.
Michael Douglas grew up not just in the shadow of a famous father, but in the orbit of Hollywood royalty. He witnessed firsthand the emotional toll fame took on Kirk Douglas, the strained relationships, the public image maintenance, the constant sense of competition. In interviews, Michael has been candid about the complexity of their relationship. Quote, "It was not particularly good in the beginning," he told Chris Wallace in 2024, noting that Kirk's career, quote, "definitely went first before family." The senior Douglas was rarely around, consumed by film sets, production deals, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Michael has said it wasn't until the success of Fatal Attraction and Wall Street in the late 80s that he finally felt free of his father's shadow. Michael has never outright said that Kirk hated Lancaster, but the implications are clear in his reflections. The rivalry was real, the jokes were not always funny, and the pain, buried under decades of public partnership, ran deeper than most fans could imagine. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think this rivalry made both of their performances better? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.